want to welcome you all to The Gateway.
The Gateway is a video podcast directed and hosted by staff members of Somerset Community College's student newspaper, The Bridge.
This is The Gateway.
Hello, this is Laurie,
Kinsley,
and Makayla. Before we begin our podcast, we'd like to thank the City of Burnside for letting us use their facilities.
and especially Burnside Mayor Robert Lawson for letting us use his office.
Now sit back and enjoy our interview with SEC alumni and Exile band member
Marlon Hargis. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into The Gateway. I'm your host, Laurie Abbott. This is one of our staff members, Kinsley Perkins, and today with us, we have Marlon Hargis of Exile.
Hey, hi folks.
So we just have a couple questions for you as a former SEC student.
All right. I'll try to remember. It's been a long time. It was the, late 60s around, actually I don't remember the exact years, probably 68, 69, somewhere in there.
Yeah, we actually have some of the old newspapers we worked on from March 12th of 1969.
Wow, I'll be darned. Yeah. It's funny, we did an interview a couple weeks ago. I honestly had I had forgotten about working on this because it's been a long time, but now I do remember. And I see some people I vaguely remember from school in here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, I'll be darned.
Does this jog any memories of SEC?
A little bit. Can I keep these copies at some point?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'd love to have these. It does. I just remember. Well, when I went there, it was still pretty. There was just one big building, and there were some temporary buildings out. So I'm sure it's changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
I've probably grown quite a bit since then. But that's kind of my memory. And of course, most of the students we just came to class and then went back home. There wasn't a lot of what I would call campus activities or anything. It was just a community college starting out. So that's kind of my memory of it, basically.
What was SCC like back then?
Small. And again, I remember, and I apologize, I don't remember who my instructor was that did the newspaper. And I also had a really good instructor who helped me do the radio station. And I'm sorry I don't remember the names, but they were very good at what they did. And, they definitely helped me out. And I think it's helped me in a music career because I saw the other side of the business. In other words, if I go to a radio station to do an interview or something, I understand what they're doing and what they're going through, or a newspaper. Because after I left Somerset Community College, to be an intern, you worked for the Commonwealth Journal.
Yeah.
And then I later got a job working at the Commonwealth Journal for a couple of years. So again, when I do interviews, it sort of helps me because I see from their perspective what they want to do and what they're doing. So it's all been helpful, even though it hasn't directly related to music.
Were you a musician while you were at SCC?
I was. I have been playing. Well, I started playing music the same year that Exile started, which was 1963, a long time ago. So I was already playing music and had been for years, actually, when I started at SEC. And on weekends, I would go play all around the state and everything then while I was going there.
What band were you with at that time?
Oh, I have to think a minute.
It's okay.
Actually, I was with there was a group. It was called Gary and Sherry Edwards and the Embers, and it was a fairly well known group in the state of Kentucky. And I think I was playing with that group then. And an interesting thing, I remember one time. This was before I joined the band Exile. I remember actually seeing the band play at the community college. There was like a little, I don't know what you would call it, I guess it was a lunchroom that was made into a concert thing at night. I remember seeing the band playing there a couple of times at the college at that point.
If I remember correctly, did you say it was a step down when you went from your band to Exile? Like you were making less money?
No, not that band.
Oh, okay.
But when you say a step down, not musically, but monetarily, and that kind of gets to a thing about Exile is at a certain point in the band's career, we decided that we were going to do our own material. We weren't going to be a cover band like a lot of other groups. So the band, we didn't make as much money as a lot of other groups because people that hired bands wanted cover bands, you know. So when you say a step down, I remember I was playing in a band in a club in Lexington, and I was earning a few $100s a week, which was really good money. You got to remember, this is the early 70s. And when I started with Exile, we weren't making much money at all. But we had a belief that if we stuck with doing that, it would pay off in the long run. And it did after a few years. So yeah, it was sort of a step down monetarily, I guess you would say.
How much more did you love the creativity that came with it?
Difference between night and day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're playing when you're doing what you call a cover band, you're playing other people's material. I mean, it's kind of fun, but it's not artistically. It doesn't fulfill you. You're just copying what someone else does.
Mm-hmm.
So when with a group like Exile, where we do our own material, you get to artistically, you know, do what you feel and put into the record. So it's a huge difference.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got with Exile?
Well, let's see. You're asking me these questions from many years ago. So, I mean, I knew all the guys in the band. We were all at different points playing in different bands around the state. But everyone kind of knew each other. I mean, musicians knew people from other bands. So they knew who I was, and I knew some of the band members. I was actually working in a recording studio in Lexington, and I think I had asked a couple of the guys to come in and play on some sessions. So we kind of got to know each other through the recording studio. And then at a certain point, a keyboard player who was with him had left the band. He had left for a few months. I didn't directly replace him. So they were looking for another keyboard player, and I guess they liked what I was doing, and we all seemed to get along, which is just as important, by the way. So they asked me to join, and I didn't really have to think too much about it, you know, because that was Exile was the best band in this part of the country at that point.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And you still get along with your bandmates?
No, we hate each other. We do. Actually, that's, you know, and that let me make that point. I think to be in a band, it's just as important that you get along as well as a musicianship. I mean, you have to be a good musician, but I mean, there have been plenty of people in the band over the years that may have been great musicians, but if they were, let me think of the right word, if they were jerks, and I'm being polite, they didn't last very long. Because, I mean, we've been around each other for, you know, basically anywhere from 40 to 50 years, and you have to be able to get along. So and the five of us have been together off and on for, I guess, 45, 50 years, and you know, you just learn to. It's kind of like being in a family. You learn to accept little stuff that other people do that you might find irritating, but you just. I always said you don't sweat the small stuff. You just learn to get along. And believe it or not, we the five of us actually enjoy being around each other, you know, after all these years. So we're very lucky in that respect.
What was SEC's impact on you, if you remember?
Well, it got my grades back up. I think, actually, I went to the main campus of UK. I think I graduated from high school in '66, I believe. And I went to UK for 2 years. I was a music major at first. And after the first year, I sort of became disillusioned with... I realized at that point, if you were a music major, you could only do one of two things. You become a band director, or you could become a performer, like classical performer. And I decided I didn't want to do either one. And band directors are great, but I didn't have the patience for it. I would not have had the patience for it. So at a certain point, I became disillusioned. And to be totally honest, I think my grades sort of suffered the second year. So, I lived in Somerset, and I decided to come back to the community college. So I thought, well, that would be, not that the classes were easier, just the environment would be different. And I switched majors. I switched to a telecommunications major, which I actually liked it. And if I recall, I think my grades were pretty good. And then after I'd got an associate degree, I went back to the main campus at UK for another year or two. I never actually did get a bachelor's degree because I was making a good living playing music. At a certain point, I decided, well, let's do that full time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually, SEC, it was very helpful. And like I say, as far as learning a lot about the communications, I had really good instructors. I think that's one thing about that point, a small college. There were small classes. You could have more one-on-one interaction with the instructors, as opposed to UK at the main campus, where you might have 50, 100 people in a classroom. So that was a big difference at that point.
Have you been back to SCC since you graduated?
No. Wouldn't even know where to find. I think I know sort of where it is, but no, I haven't. I don't think so, unless I went back at some point with a band to play at a concert, and I don't remember doing that. So no, I haven't been.
We're up to 5 buildings on North Campus and
wow.
I think 4 buildings on South Campus.
Wait, you have 2 campuses? That's big time now. No, I really wouldn't. I wouldn't even know where the original building was. I don't think if it's still there. I don't know.
I think you're talking about Mies Building. It was built in 1965.
That sounds about right. Yeah, that was the only building there at that point.
So were all your classes in that one room, or did you go to any temporary buildings?
Well, there were a couple of temporary buildings, and I remember having 1 or 2 classes in one of those, but everything else was all in one building. In a way, it was kind of like being in high school. I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way. It was, but it was sort of like that. And there weren't that many students then. I'm guessing just a few hundred or something at that point. I'm not really sure.
In what ways was it like high school?
Just all being in one building.
Oh, yeah.
Other than that, not really. I mean, it's not like you didn't have a lot of social interaction like high school. Mm-hmm. But that was the only similarity, I think.
Can you tell us about touring with Exile?
Well, we're still doing it. It's we've been doing 50. Actually, next year we will celebrate 60 years as a band, which we're one of the longest running bands in the world. Actually, I think the Rolling Stones and maybe the Beach Boys have been around longer. We still enjoy touring. I mean, we were looking forward to performing tonight. I think as we get older, I don't think we enjoy the travel as much. I mean, it's harder on you as you get older. We're all, married, settled down, have kids, grandkids. We prefer to spend as much time as possible at home. So it's not like everyone pictures the partying and all the glamour and carrying on. It's mainly boring, to be honest about it, because you're on a bus for hours. You sit around waiting to do a sound check and to perform. So for anyone who thinks it's a glamorous party atmosphere, at least in our case, it's not. Mm-hmm. It's a job like anything else.
What got you into music to begin with?
My parents made me take piano lessons, I think when I was about 5 or 6. And I actually hated it for years when I was little because I wanted to be out like other kids playing ball and that sort of stuff. So I studied classical music and then up through the university. And then when the Beatles came along and I started playing in bands, my whole attitude changed, obviously. But so I got into music because my parents forced me to. Thankfully, I'm glad they did. If someone about came in the door there.
Yeah. So, can you tell me about what makes Exile unique?
Well, for one thing, our longevity. I mean, as I say, we're one of the few bands that have been around as long as we have. We have a unique sound. I don't know what you'd call it. I mean, I would call it kind of an R&B or a country rock sound. I think if we ever tried to really analyze it, we'd probably screw it up. It's just a sound that happened naturally. The five of us, when we play together, we just seem it seems to gel into an overall sound. And again, I don't know what that is, and it just works. So I think we have. I would like to think that when you hear one of our records, you sort of recognize what we sound like, whatever that is, as opposed to be blunt about it, a lot of modern country and pop music, it all sounds sort of the same to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, one artist sounds pretty much similar to another artist and everything, but I think us and maybe some groups from our era, I think we have a little more of a unique sound each, or like to hope so at least.
I'd say people stick to that now, a more general sound because it's safe. Did it feel like you were risking anything, creating a unique sound?
No, because we didn't really try to create it. It just happened. Mm-hmm. In other words, that's just the way we sound. And now, in thinking about it, I think maybe that's one reason we've sort of kept a level of success through the years, is we've never tried to change to appeal to whatever's happening at the moment. In other words, we never tried to be a punk rock act or a disco act or some other things that have come along. We've never tried to dilute our sound. So again, maybe that's what's contributed to our longevity, I think.
And the only original member left is JP.
JP, he was around when the band first. Actually, they were just a bunch of high school kids, and really the rest of us were in different bands at that same point. So we really all started almost exactly the same time, and in different bands, and we all knew each other from early years. So JP was kind of around when the band started. I joined in the early 70s, and then other members. But we've all been around since the 70s. So the five of us have been doing this for a long time.
Do you guys ever see yourself taking a break from music?
Well, we did a couple of years ago when everything shut down.
Yeah.
That was actually the longest we had ever been without performing. And it was kind of an adjustment to make, because I remember it sort of bothered me, because that's a musician. That's what we are. I mean, it's not just a job. I mean, it's what we are individually. And when you found out you couldn't perform we were off for a whole year, and I think everyone really missed doing it. And to be blunt about it, we're getting up in years. We're relatively old, but I don't think any of us really want to quit or take a break. At this point, why? Why take a break from something you enjoy doing? Yeah. It's not. It's not. It just sounds corny. It's not just a job. It's what we do. So I don't think we'll take a break unless we have to.
What other ways did COVID impact you guys?
Well, it took away a lot of money for one thing. However, we survived okay. I think it made us when we were finally able to start back touring. I think it made us appreciate touring. Maybe the break was maybe it wasn't bad in a way, because it made us really appreciate the audience when we were able to come back. And I think audiences really miss seeing acts, So I remember the first couple of shows when we came back, it was this huge almost like sense of relief from the audience and from us that you can finally go out and see shows again, you know. So it wasn't all bad, really. And frankly, we all survived it. A couple of us were sick, but nothing really serious. So it just makes you take a little harder look at everything and appreciate what we have.
That's so interesting to me that you miss the audience too. Because
Yeah.
you can make music anywhere. That's the thing about music. But that connection you have with an audience, you miss that.
Yeah, because being in the studio, I mean, it's a totally different feeling. I mean, when you're in the studio recording, I mean, you're making a product, and it's very satisfying, but it's not the same as the immediate gratification you get. You know, you hear actors talk about the difference between making a movie and being on Broadway. You know, when you're making, as we call making a record, which, you know, there aren't records anymore much, but you don't, in other words, you may be in the recording studio for a few months, and when you're finishing it, you don't really know how people are going to react to it until it's released. But when you're on stage, you know immediately, you know. And, you know, it's a rewarding feeling to get, you know, to hear a crowd applaud and so forth. And it's not just an ego thing. It makes you realize that what you're doing makes a difference to people. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So, no, we miss that interaction with the audience for sure.
Have you always had that connection with an audience?
I think so. I mean, as I get back to the point where we always enjoy being on stage, I think that comes across to an audience, and I think it makes the audience interact more with us. You know, I've gone to see bands that you can tell they don't necessarily enjoy being on stage. They're just sort of there going through the motions, and you could tell that. And I think audiences can see that. So, and we've always said if it gets to the point where we're just going out to make money, we won't do it. I mean, that's not the bottom line. It's part of it, but the thing is, you have to enjoy it, and the audience has to enjoy it.
What usually creates the most connection between your band and the audience while you're playing it?
Just looking at the audience, and you know, just the interaction. And I would hope the music, you know, and it's always interesting, you know, when we start a song to see people singing along, knowing the lyrics, you know, smiling. I think that's what makes a connection. It's just being aware that they're out there and wanting them to have fun.
I think that's so beautiful.
Well, thank you. It's a good feeling, and I'll tell you something else that's really rewarding is a lot of times we'll have someone come up after a show and talk about what a particular song has meant to them, and it may be something. A lot of times it's just something sort of silly, like, you know, that's how I met my boyfriend or girlfriend, and sometimes people will say, well, that song meant a lot when I was going through a really crisis in my life or something. And it really makes you kind of stop and think and appreciate, I guess, what we do, that music can really affect your life in a lot of ways. I mean, you hear a song, it may bring back a memory from, well, in my case, 50 years ago. In y'all's case, it's maybe 10 years ago. But it may bring back a memory or something. I mean, can you imagine what life would be like without music? I mean, it just triggers so many other emotions, I think.
Can you tell us a little bit about Exile's successes, the big ones that have just really stuck out in your mind?
Well, I mean, I think just the fact that we've been doing it so long, of course, you know, appearing on a lot of great TV shows and concerts. I think one big success is we were inducted into the Kentucky Music Hall of Fame a few years ago. That would have to be one of the highlights, just to be appreciated by your peers and by the state of Kentucky and everything. So that would probably be one of our big successes, I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was.
What's the most interesting story behind a song that you guys have done?
Well, I'd think I've never been asked that question. That's a question you should probably ask one of the songwriters. I don't write really hardly any of the material, so you should probably ask a writer what prompted them to write a particular song. Couple of things. There's one of our big hits was called "She's a Miracle," and a lot of people assume that song is about a man and a woman's relationship. Actually, JP and Sonny, they wrote that about their daughters. Sonny had a young daughter, and JP's daughter was just about ready to be born. So when they were writing the song, they were actually talking about, when "She's a Miracle," they were talking about their daughters. A lot of people interpret it differently. So that's maybe one story behind the song. Now, another thing I'll tell you in a little different way, our biggest hit is a song called "Kiss You All Over." That was not written by us, it was written by our producer. Well, when we recorded the song, we didn't think that song would be a hit at all. Matter of fact, we didn't want it to be released. I don't remember the specific reasons, but when they said we're going to release "Kiss You All Over," we thought, and that's a real mistake. That song's not going to do anything. Then all of a sudden it started becoming a huge worldwide hit. Then we loved the song. But we really didn't think that song was going to do anything at all. So you just never know. Just have to wait and see.
Is there anything you would tell to aspiring musicians?
Well, let me think. It's really hard. I mean, the business is so different today than it was when we started. I would say, first of all, and I don't mean this in a flippant way. I would say have a backup plan. I mean, get an education, and even if it's not a college education, a trade or something, get something that when you're struggling that you can help, sort of support yourself, because chances are you're going to be struggling. I mean, the things are a little different now in that a lot of these talent things like America's Got Talent and all that sort of stuff, a lot of artists do sort of become overnight successes, but that's the exception to the rule. So you need to be prepared to frankly struggle, and which leads me to another thing. You need to have the passion and believe that what you're doing is important. You need to have that passion, and you need to also treat it like a business. I mean, it's a music business. I mean, don't go into it just to party and have a good time and all that sort of stuff. That's the wrong reason. If you really believe in what you do, treat it seriously, have a passion, and have a backup plan. Those are kind of three things I would say.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, SCC and The Bridge. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. It was very enjoyable. I hope you all enjoyed it.
For more information on SCC student newspaper, The Bridge, or the Gateway Video Podcast, email us at sccthebridge@yahoo.com or contact one of the course advisors.
This is the Gateway signing out.
Somebody do a clap.
Hold on. I have to... Okay.
And look up here. Here we go.
Hello, this is Laurie, Kinsley,
And Makayla.
and before we begin our podcast, we want to thank Sorry. I forgot what I was saying.
That's all right. Just start over.